All right, good evening, folks. Welcome to tonight's Farminar. I'm Steve Carlson. I'm a staff member at Practical Farmers of Iowa here in Ames, Iowa, and our new office location. Just moved last week to the south side of Ames. It's nice to see where everybody else is tuning in from, so thanks for sharing that. If you haven't put that in the chat box, feel free to do so. It's kind of interesting to see where everyone's at. So, yeah, thanks for joining tonight. And the topic tonight is going to be planter technology, as you're aware. And we've got two guys who have been involved in a lot of test plots, looking at a range of details, and they'll share planter data and harvest data and talk about the return on investment for some of this technology. So we've got Jeremy Marston, who helped found ChuMaker Technology, which focuses on this sort of technology and helps farmers find solutions that work on their farm, which he'll talk about here in a little bit. And we've also got Robb, who farms near Davenport and has partnered with Jeremy on a number of projects. So glad to have both these guys here to talk about what they've learned tinkering around with planter technology. But before I turn it over to Jeremy and Robb, I'm going to talk a little bit about Practical Farmers of Iowa first. So this is part of our Winter Farminar series. I think this is like number 15 in a row, and we've got one more before we call it quits for the season. We do these online Tuesday night webinars at 7 o'clock every Tuesday night, going pretty much November through into March. And then after next week, which next week you can see is direct marketing at Seven Sons Farm. That's meat marketing, livestock farm over in Indiana. So that'll be real interesting about how that farm does their direct marketing. But after Farminar season ends, we switch gears and start doing on-farm field days again. And so I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But if you want to dig through our Farminar archives, we record all of these. We're recording tonight. So if you want to revisit this or share it with a friend, it'll be in the archive at the link on the screen there. We've done, I think, like 153 of these Farminars now, and they're all recorded in the archives. So if you've got a question about anything on farm related, livestock, horticulture, cover crops, row crops, there's a good chance we've covered it in some way, shape, or form in a past Farminar. So you can dig those up through that on our website. But Practical Farmers of Iowa, we are a nonprofit, member-based organization, been around for over 30 years with the same kind of focus. We are farmer-led, member-driven. We are what we consider a big tent where we offer programming for farming in all enterprises and for all farm sizes, organic, conventional, everything in between. We have members that do it, and we try and provide programming on whatever topics our members are interested in. So our mission at Practical Farmers of Iowa is equipping farmers to build resilient farms and communities. And our core focus to achieve this mission is with farmer-led investigation and information sharing. So the way we do that is our farmer-led investigation is what we do with our on-farm research program. We call it our Cooperators program. And we work with farmers across the state to design replicated on-farm research trials on the topics they're curious about. And then they compile the data, and then we help summarize that into research reports and distribute that to whoever wants to learn about those topics. And then the information sharing, farmer-to-farmer education is what we do, and we do that through these Farminars. We do that through our on-farm field days. We have an annual conference in January in Ames. We do workshops, socials, retreats, all kinds of stuff to facilitate this knowledge sharing. And if you check our website for our event calendar, you'll see that we do have some spring cover crop field days planned that are starting March 27th. Some of these are cover crops in a corn soybean rotation. Some of these are that plus grazing cover crops as well. So definitely check out our website for more details about those, but mark your calendar if one of those cover crop field days is near you. Those are all free, open to the public. So we'd love to have you join us. And speaking of joining us, we are a member-based organization, so we'd love to have you become a PFI member. Not only do you get discounts to our conference and some of the events that we actually charge for, but aside from that, you get our quarterly newsletter, you get to access our email discussion groups, You can do our programming like our on-farm research through the Cooperators program. Beginning farmers get to participate in our beginning farmer programs. But really, the main benefit of being a PFI member is joining the network of other farmers and farm supporters, friends of farmers, who want to see sustainable agriculture on the Iowa landscape and beyond Iowa. And our members are really willing to help each other improve their profitability and their efficiency and improve their stewardship. So you'll be joining a great group of farmers and friends of farmers that all are interested in the same thing. So that's a little bit about Practical Farmers of Iowa. Again, check out practicalfarmers.org for more info. A couple of rules here before I turn it over to Jeremy and Rob. You got the gist here how that chat box works. If you have questions for our presenters, go ahead and put that in the chat box. While these guys are talking, if they see it and they want to answer it, then they'll go ahead and do that. If your question's in the chat box and they don't notice it, I'll make sure we circle back and answer those questions at the end of their presentation. So go ahead and pop your questions in there. Try and be respectful of our presenters, be respectful of everyone else who's tuning in here. We are a diverse group with diverse opinions, so keep that in mind. I do want to ask that you give us a little bit of feedback. So there's that link there for a SurveyMonkey survey. It's just going to take you 20 seconds to check a couple boxes. Let us know what you thought about the presentation tonight, but that's also your opportunity to tell us what topics you want Practical Farmers to focus on in the future. So do give us some feedback about what we're doing and about what you want to hear about in the future. That link you can click on right now and then take the survey after, or I'll put it in the chat box a little bit later. Also, we have an email list for these Farminars. If you want to get on and get updates about what topics are coming up and anything Farminar, you can click that link there, get on our Farminar email list. And then finally, just to give us a better idea of how many people are tuning in and watching these things, on the lower left corner of your screen in this Adobe Connect window here is a little poll that says how many people are attending via your connection. So if there's a couple of you that are watching from one computer, check that right box, the correct box, so just so we can get a more accurate head count about how many folks are listening in here. So I appreciate that. Yeah, and if you didn't hear at the beginning, let us know in the chat box where you're tuning in from. That's fun to see. Yeah, so these guys, Jeremy and Rob, are going to talk for maybe about 60 minutes or so, and then closer to 8 o'clock, we'll stop and we'll do questions if we haven't got to them already. So thanks everybody for tuning in, and Jeremy and Rob, I'm going to switch presentations here and let you guys take it over.
All right, sounds good. All right, so tonight what we're going to talk about is planter technology. At the very beginning, we're going to go through a lot of the cover crop stuff that we saw with our test planter, and we'll kind of go through an agenda here. But mainly what we're going to do is we're going to go through who we are. So I'm going to give you a little background of ChuMaker. Robb Walt is going to give a little background of Rafter E Ranch and his operation. We're also going to go through why we did it. So what are the reasonings behind why we built a test planner, what our goals were of that, and just to kind of show you what we were looking to do here in 17. We'll give an overview of the test planner, just kind of talk about it and how we set it up. So that way, as we go through the results, you'll have a better understanding of how that planner was equipped to be able to get those results. And then finally, we're going to go through a lot of results and kind of walk through those, anywhere from hydraulic downforce to row shutoffs to population singulation, all those type of things. So again, I'll keep watching as what he said over in the chat box, and if there's questions, I'll try to see those, and we'll just kind of go informal and kind of go from there. So the first part is just to kind of give you a really brief overview of ChuMaker, just so you know who we are. We're in Muscatine, Iowa. We started the company in November of 2007 or 14. Why we really started it is we were hearing from a lot of customers is on the technology. How do we do it? Where do we start? We know we need technology, but we don't know where to go. I have technology, but I don't know how to use it. And then I know how to use it, but now what do I do with the data? So we were really seeing a lot of this. And where it came back to also was on the colorblind side of it. We had guys that were running red, green, yellow, blue, different brands, and they were trying to figure out how to get it all to work together. So we wanted to solve that for them. Also, we do technology sales, so we are a precision planting ag leader. We have agreements with even red and green to be able to get some new and used equipment from them as far as technology. But really, we just mainly did that to help our customers out. Our sole business is a big part of it is the support agreement side. So we try to get data. We try to help customers with their data. Robb is one of those guys we work with, and that's how we grew a relationship with him. But we really help these guys out and make sure they get the most out of the expense of the technology they've bought from not only us but other people. We're currently 5 full-time employees in the ChuMaker division, and we're looking to grow. We've grown. We've doubled in size since 2014. So we're looking for 2 more full-time people right now, and also an internship going into this year. So just kind of showing you a little bit of where we're at and where we're going there. Next up, Robb will kind of go through his operation.
Hello, Robb Walt. Reside right outside of Davenport, between Davenport and Bluegrass, 4 miles north of the Mississippi River. So just we're a row crop. We grow corn, soybeans, about 1,000 acres total. We also grow a lot of alfalfa, grass, hay mixed to sell to horse people and also to feed ourselves. We have a cow-calf operation. We have a wean to finish custom, so we are using hog manure for some of our nutrients. We do a little bit of custom farming, a lot more custom harvesting than we do of planting, but with some of the things that you'll see later on, we are picking up a little bit more custom planting just because of the technology that we're using. I currently am a director 6 representative to the Iowa Soybean Association board. So I just recently got back from Commodity Classic out in Anaheim, California, where we went to a lot of seminars out there, a lot about planter setups. And I guess the biggest thing that we learned out there was how to be profitable this year, or if there is any profit this year. So that's just a brief overview. I started working with ChuMaker when they were just came to be, and I wanted somebody. We do a lot of automated crop reporting on our insurance side, and this was a great way to help them get my data gathered and delivered to the right insurance agent. It made my life a whole lot easier, and then it just kind of morphed into what you're going to learn about tonight.
Thanks, Robb. So what we're going to do is I'll probably be doing quite a bit of the talking about on the planner, actually, how it's set up, the data side of it. When it gets into the operation and the experience and what Robb actually saw in the field when he was operating it, he'll really cover a lot of that side of it. So you'll probably hear me ramble on for quite a while here. So that'll be really good for all of you. But really what to go on through it is why we built the planner. So we've been selling precision equipment for 2 or 3 years, and we really drive return on investment. We talk to every single person that we on the technology on what the return on investment. So how fast can it return? I typically love selling stuff that can return on investment in 1 to 2 years, and and most farmers, I believe, are looking for technology that returns that fast. And what we found is I'm going to throw up some things right here, and what we found is there's so many ads out there that are showing, for instance, the if you look at the precision planting side of it, it was why focus on downforce? It's 11 bushel to get in, 11 bushel per acre. Well, that's for somebody to read that. Is it trustworthy? Do they believe it? Those type of things, and that's always a concern. Even from a salesperson, is how truthful is that? How they get the data? Those type of things. Down here at Copperhead, 8 bushel per acre increase, one simple upgrade. Ag leader, they could sell. You could pay for hydraulic downforce in 428.72 acres. Well, how'd they come up with those numbers? So And we wanted to be able to show our numbers to our customers and show it, as you can see here, on a total field basis versus small test plots. And we just we really trust. We want the customers to trust us when we talk to them about this. So when I start spouting off what manufacturers are saying, I just struggle with that. And being able to have data that we could even walk right to the farm, show them the data, have the harvest data, let them see it. Also talk to farmers like Robb Ewalt that actually was out there and saw it when he was combining. To some other ones we work with is a huge advantage for us, and it gives us a little bit of credibility too. Also, what we wanted to do is one of the things that we strive is we always tell guys is the best planter you currently have is the one that's in your shed versus going out and buying new. So I'll show you some examples of what that looks like. And also what we wanted to do is gain experience. So we do a lot with it. We're always out there with our customers in the field, but to actually go out, build it, put it in the field, run it all the way through and work with Robb through that was definitely we gained a lot of experience and we learned a lot there too. Not only from my side, but also our employees, getting them out there and getting hands on. So side by side, what we tried to do was we really wanted to test a couple things, get it very simple side by side comparison. And so what we did was we actually, as you can see here, the all rows, we were able to all rows VSET, Wave Vision, Keaton seed firmers, clean sweep, Yetter, row cleaners. You know, it was all consistent across the whole thing. And then really what we were testing was hydraulic downforce and electric drive row shutoffs versus on the right side, we had chain driven and spring downforce. So it's a very good planner, and we just want to really test those things side by side as we were going through all of our fields. So there's kind of a look into our cab. So to get an 8-row by, an 8-row comparison, we went out and got the 16-row planner, and we actually made it 2 separate planners so we can run them separately. And as you can see on the left-hand side in the cab, that's our 2020, with our, that's our hydraulic downforce side and electric drives. The one in the middle, 2020, so we actually ran 2. That was our standard driven one. And what that gave us the ability is we planted almost 1,000 acres with side-by-side comparison in multiple different tillage practices. So we didn't just do plots, 100 feet, 100 yards at a time. We were able to go through a lot of acres and get some really, really good data there. Also in the cab, you can see here we have an ag leader display for guidance. Everything was ran off of RTK. And then you can see over kind of the right middle is our clean sweep. So we were able to adjust our Yetter floating row cleaners so that way we can, especially with our different tillage practices, we can make changes as needed. So that other example that we mentioned is talking about a new versus used. We wanted to give some examples in real life of what that looks like. So we went over, and you can see on the right-hand top side is the used planter with the Kinsey 2600. So we went and bought a 1996 Kinsey 16-row, 30-inch 2600 from a local Case IH dealer, and it was a little rough, but we ended up spending about $10,000 for all new openers, new gauge wheels, rebuilt some of the arms, a whole new closing wheel system. We really went all the way through that, a couple new tires and all those type of things, and then we outfitted it all. So if you outfitted that planter all the way out, like what we did, but on all 16, you'd have about 90,000 in it. I just kind of give you a comparison. If you went out and bought a brand new 3600, depending on where you're located at, with just a KPM monitor, finger pickups, no row clutches, mechanical driven, spring downforce, no row cleaners. I mean, we're talking bare bones planter. You'd be over 100,000. Another thing to think through is already own a planter. As you can see, if you already own that 2600 or other planter, is in good shape, you could do everything we're doing, for right around that 50. So it just kind of gives you a good example of, showing that the best planter you currently do have is the one that you do have in your shed, and teaming up with a good technology dealership can really help you accelerate that planter without having to spend a lot of money in it. So really what we wanted to go through is on the beginning side of it is our finding of the hydraulic downforce versus spring downforce. So if you look on the picture here, we have springs here on the left and also an airbag. Now, when I'm talking to guys on an airbag, is on the airbag side of it, it's basically a spring. So you could change your air pressure, but it really does act like a spring. Now, there are some active air pressure systems out there that will change relatively slowly to give you some of those things. But really, it's just it's a fancy spring in that mind. And also, one negative thing on an airbag is you are adjusting all of your rows exactly the same. Where on a spring system, you can change different rows differently, especially ones that are behind some of your tractor tires and those type of things. Over to the right is the hydraulic downforce. So here's a picture of one of the planters with hydraulic downforce on it and what that cylinder looks like that's replacing those springs. So that's kind of how this is outfitted here on the right hand side, and then on the left hand side we've got springs that are like in the bottom left. So just to kind of walk through downforce, and when I'm talking downforce, that way we're all kind of on the same page. This is a good representation of what a planter row unit and what adds weight and what subtracts weight. And we'll have some examples of both of these, of how some of these have affected it greatly. So if you look at it on the top side of it, you've got pluses with arrows going down. So really what's adding pressure is your, air, your springs, your hydraulic downforce, that's pressing down the weight of your seed in the box and also the weight of your insecticide if you're running insecticide. And as you know, those two, insecticide and seed, are going to change as you go through the field as those empty out or as you fill them up. So that'll be a little bit variable there. On the bottom side, this is kind of what takes stuff off of, weight off of it. Your row cleaners on the bottom left there, if you really push those down a lot, it's going to, take a lot of weight off that and put it onto those. And we'll have some examples of that. Also, your gauge wheels here, that's holding weight up. So as your opener goes into the ground, it's getting pushed on those gauge wheels, and that's how it's measuring how much extra weight you have on that gauge wheel. And then you have your closing wheel system. Depending on what closing wheels you have and what setting you're setting those at, you're obviously going to be subtracting weight off that row unit too. So all this kind of stuff kind of works together as you're going through the field and making changes. If you look on I'll try to draw here. So here's my little arrow right here. So as you can see, this sensor right here, that's how we measure downforce. This green arrow kind of in the center. So as that gauge wheel, as the opener goes in the ground, it presses up on those gauge wheels. It goes against the stop that is what you've set for your depth. And that's how we're measuring extra downforce. If there is no measurement in that sensor, that means you're losing ground contact, which means you're also shallow planting. So that'll come into play here in a little bit. So we're going to kind of give you a start of what a map looks like and kind of what we saw. So this is in a cover crop field. So this is diving right into the result side of it. If you look right here in the center, what this means is this is how much downforce was on each one of those rows that was measured by that sensor I just showed you. Green and yellow are good, so that means you were in that 0 to 150 range. You're planting at depth without having to put a lot of weight, at it, so there's green and yellow here. When you look at blue is very, very bad. And what that means is when we're talking about loss of ground contact is if it's blue, that means your opener wasn't all the way in the ground. You were shallow planting every one of those seeds. So that's greatly affects your yield as you're walking through there. Also, you have some red areas. What that meant is you were putting on more than 200 pounds. So your gauge wheels were holding up over 200 pounds of weight on those. And we'll kind of walk through some of that in the data side of it too. This is another really, really good map. So this kind of walks you, and we're trying to figure out the story, as we walk through this. And this is an as applied. So when you look through these right here in the center, the striped pink, that is the rows that do not have hydraulic downforce. And the rows that have red, green, yellow, as you're walking through here in the middle, these where there's data, that's the hydraulic downforce. So that's telling us how much weight it's pushing down on that row unit to be able to get it to depth. So what it's telling me here is in the bottom left, right in here, it's green. We're putting on 100 to 200 pounds right here, but up in this area, you can start seeing we're putting in areas over 450 pounds. So in this one field, this is a cover crop field that we were planting corn into. We were seeing a range of 100 pounds to 450 pounds difference to keep that at the correct weight distribution on there. So if you go back and look at this, all these green areas, to keep them where we want them to be happy, we were having to put quite a bit of different weight, down here versus up in the top right. It gives you a good representation of kind of what happened in that field.
I'll talk a little bit of history on this field so you guys have an idea on what it is. So I would say 90% of the ground that I farm is a clay timber soil. It can be challenging. This farm is one that we've only farmed for 2 years now. I'll point out you see a line running from the top down across on an angle there. That actually used to be old Highway 22 going through the state through Muscatine County, and that was way back before they paved any roads. But that's an old roadbed, so now you can see why that is. And you can see that this farm also is a little bit wet. It has some challenges. We're trying to get a little bit more drainage put in this farm as we continue with it. But so that's kind of the challenges that we're dealing with, and it slopes. You can't really tell, but from the top is the high ground, and the bottom where the trees are, that's a creek running down along there. So that gives you a pretty good idea on the slope of the ground. It's probably probably a D slope. So that's why we're cover cropping. It was beans previously, and we put cereal rye down, and got a nice cover crop established from the fall of 16 to the spring of 17. It was really a good cover crop year for us in this area. So that's what we were planting into.
Yep. One of the questions that Margaret have on here is what was the cover crop? And you mentioned that of cereal rye. What was the size and height when we planted that?
We killed it off. This field was the last field planted. It would have been about shin high. It hadn't gone to. We didn't have a seed head. We killed it off fairly early because it was going to be corn, and we get a little bit concerned about armyworms and stuff if we let it go too long. So we killed it off, and it was maybe about shin high when we killed it off, and that would have been about maybe about the 15th of April. We kind of have to go back a ways, but that's normally when we kill off our rye.
Yep. One of the other questions on here was what kind of seeding depth were you finding in the blue areas? As you can see right in this this roadbed right here, the spring side was basically right on top, just maybe a little below, and then the Delta Force side, we were able to get pretty close to depth there. In the top right side of it, we were obviously able to get to depth very easily, or with 470 or 50 pounds of weight. The other side, I'm trying to remember if we really checked. I mean, we know it was shallow. Up to what point it was shallow, we're not 100% sure. That's something I'll make a note that we can get some more data here for us this year. Walking into just a little bit more data as you see it. This is a good ride map. So what this means is there's an accelerometer on that row, and you could easily see as you walk through here. I'll have my little blue-green cursor here. The rows without Delta Force, I mean, there is some areas that are getting pretty rough, where the Delta Force is able to pin that row down, which me personally, I would probably put that in turn as it's not going to wear that row unit out as much and beat back there, and also maybe helping out on your singulation side of it too. So just kind of want to show you some of the maps, other maps there too. So when we look at the data, so on this field, actually all cover crop that we did, you can see over on the left is we have delta force, and then down here in the middle, good downforce. You look right here with delta force, we still weren't perfect. We were about 84% good. Excessive downforce, we were about 8.8. What that means is we were over 200 pounds. Loss of ground contact, we were below 0. We're about 7.2. We always try to kind of meet those in the middle a little bit to also, to try to even get a little bit on the excess side if we can. And I'll show you some data there that'll explain that to you too. On the spring side, this is the spring side over here. So across all of our cover crop, we had them pinned down as much as we could, as much weight as we could on them. We tried to keep them full, those type of things. But our good downforce, we were only about a little over 50%. 10% was in excess, and the real issue we had was loss of ground contact, which is about 36% of our field was shallow planted. Yeah, we really struggled, in there getting to depth. So let's kind of look at the data. So just showing you, we went all the way to yield with it. We combined this whole field here, and we brought it into SMS, got the data. On a hydraulic downforce side of it called delta force, we were about 229.6 bushel to an acre. On the side that was non-delta force, because of that loss of ground contact, we were around 218 bushels to an acre. So in this scenario, for what we were running in cover crop, we were about that 11 and a half or 11 and a quarter bushel to an acre. It's pretty considerable, going into corn and the cover crop on that. This next part is really interesting. We're both laughing about this. Yeah, Rob's going to give a little background of this field and kind of why it did what it did, and he can kind of walk through it.
So we get lots of pretty colors on this map. What this is showing, this was a soybean field that was planted late. We were doing some waterway restoration, and so we had cereal rye on this farm also, and I wasn't in a big hurry to kill it off because we were doing our waterway stuff, and so we killed it off and it was headed out, and so it was kind of an adventure. I'd never done anything, let it go that far, and a little technology to a farmer is kind of a dangerous thing sometimes, because this is where I kind of got, this was the first time I actually ran this planter, and I wanted to see what all the neat little switches did in there. And the main thing I was kind of playing with was the clean sweeps, to see what I could do, how clean I could get that cover crop moved off just for that furrow. And so I cranked the air pressure all the way up, so they were very, very aggressive, and they did a nice job cleaning out the furrow. The only thing that happened was my springs could not compensate for that much downforce on the row cleaner. So like Jeremy was saying, how you had those things pushing up, well, that was one of them. And so you can see Jeremy's going to have to tell you what the colors mean, but I can't remember which one's good and which one's bad, but I know there's one that's really bad in here.
Yeah.
And so I'll let him tell you what happened, but that's how we got it. It was kind of, but I think we can all learn that downforce works, and it works really well in this situation. It really proved itself where, did I need to run the clean sweeps that aggressive? Probably not, but they were there and there was only a switch to move it, so why not try it? Well, you're going to see some pretty drastic results on what happens when you go to the extreme, but it does prove that the downforce is a very important component to even with soybeans.
Yep. So Chris just asked a question to you on the row cleaners, if they were frame or row mounted. Ours were actually row mounted to it. They're Yetter floating row cleaners. with the air cylinders from precision planting, so that way we could adjust that from the field. And what Rob was mentioning is he was putting a lot of pressure on them to be able to move that cover crop out of the way to get a really good seed bed. And what was happening is down here, if you look on the map on the left, it's blue. Those are the sides with spring downforce. It just did not have enough downforce to compensate for putting that much weight on those row cleaners. So we shallow planted in stripes, as you can see right here. And one thing you can notice is one thing that Rob did is he started playing around with it even more. And over here to the right, you can start seeing it's getting a little better. And what that is that's him.
I actually put those into neutral right there.
Yep.
In that area.
So he just kind of put them to float, so that way the only weight was on it was the actual weight of the row cleaner. So you can start seeing what that'll cause you there. The one on the map, you could see delta force, hydraulic downforce. We were cranked out. We were putting over 450 pounds. Actually, in areas, the scale is a little bit different here, but 450. We were actually, maxing the system out at 600 pounds of pressure per row. I mean, it was a lot of down pressure there. But what it was doing is it was giving us the ability to use those row cleaners to clean that furrow. So it let us keep doing what we wanted to do, but it was having to put a lot of weight on it. So, like I said, I'm going to show you some pictures here. Some are going to be almost make you sick, but these fields were, I don't know. Rob drove by him every day. I quit driving by him because I didn't want to look at him anymore. But Iowa Soybean Association was out here quite a bit. But as we drove by, this is what it looked like from the field. You can see on the right-hand side, we had delta force. This is your hydraulic downforce. We were very consistent on our depth. Where down over here, we were basically spreading them right over top of the ground. What I like about this is it kind of the old wise tale of beans don't matter. You can just throw them out there. This shows you right here that that's not the case. Getting them at depth into the moisture was definitely a huge deal.
Also, I think after I planted that, I think we went about 2 weeks without a rain.
Right.
So that the beans that were at depth had moisture right off the bat, so that's why they look a lot better.
Yep.
The other ones had to wait for a rain, so they were 2 weeks behind, and that made it even more drastic.
Right.
Of a visual.
So then if you look at this, this is a drone photo. So this is from a drone. I went out there and I flew it up and took some pictures. So you could drastically see 16 rows of delta force, 16 rows of not. Then this is a picture of drone deploy. So if anybody's familiar with drone deploy, this is basically the drone taking video or taking pictures, an infrared type of sensor, and it's giving you crop health. So it's basically showing you the same thing that you're seeing visually there. So pretty dramatic in our beans in here. Here's a picture, so kind of walking right into the results. Over to the right, halfway through the season, the one to the right here, this is the Iowa Soybean Association, and this is from their article that they came out and did on this field. But you can see our hydraulic downforce is right here, very healthy. It got a good start. Over here was our spring, so kind of correlated to yield. One thing that we did notice is it did catch up a little bit throughout the year. When we combined it, it looked like two different hybrids. You could definitely see the difference, there. And as we combined it, delta force, hydraulic downforce, we were about 46.2, and the spring side we were about 28.7. So we were about a 17.5 bushel advantage one side to the other in this field. So very, very dramatic there. I think Margaret has a question here about how wide was the row area that was cleaned. Our row cleaners have depth bands in them. Basically, it's set to its Yetter's setting. And
About the width of the gauge wheels.
Yeah, about the width of the gauge wheels, is what it's cleaning.
8 inches?
8 inches, yeah. That's probably pretty close. Just to kind of give you some data. So that was cover crop area. We'll real quick kind of go through conventional till and also no-till So if you guys are mixed a little bit, you kind of have an idea of that. But here is a full conventional till, very good field here. One thing what we found is kind of telling you a little story is when we were out there planting, there's 2 or 3 of us out there, and we were trying to get that spring set as best we could. I mean, we were in and out of that tractor multiple times, messing with each row separately, trying to get it fit in. What we found is one setting we'd be too much, the next setting we would be not enough. And we've always kind of said you would rather be in excess versus loss of ground contact. So we set it a little bit to the heavier side because that's what we tell our guys to do. So that's why you're seeing these red stripes go through here. That's the spring downforce. We just could not get it tweaked in enough, so we just kind of erred a little bit on the heavy side. And you can see our data right here. Kinsey 8-row planer 1 is our hydraulic downforce. We are about 98.2 good downforce. Our non-hydraulic, our springs, we were about 63. We're in excess of 30% of the time. We were over 200 pounds too much. And we kept our loss of ground contact about 7.1. So across all conventional till, which I believe was, I don't know, 300 to 400 acres, 300 probably. Delta force, hydraulic downforce, we were about 245. Non-delta force, we were about 242, so about 2.5. Especially for one of the best corn growing years we've had in our area, eastern Iowa here. I think 2.5 in that conventional till, we were really happy with that difference, especially this good a year. We do believe in a stressful year, those numbers would start separating a little bit more. No-till, similar things right here. We can kind of tell the same story that we did in the cover crop that Rob was talking about, but you can see we're red right here. We're going through it. One thing on the right-hand side, you can look at the, let me get my little arrow over here. The right-hand side of this applied map, you're starting to see it go to 450 pounds plus to keep it in the ground there. And you can start seeing we're losing some ground contact over here. That's from messing with the row cleaners also. So that was something our operator was kind of messing around with that, and he was really trying to move some material there. And it cleaned it up a few things, did some good things, but we just had to have a lot of pressure down there to keep stuff moving. So a lot of interesting things going on here. One thing to point out is to keep good down pressure. There was times that we were only putting on 50 pounds of pressure all the way up to 450. So it's a 400-pound swing in the same field. So a lot of guys I talk to, it's, hey, my fields are pretty consistent, those type of things. But showing right here, it's dramatically different throughout the field. Especially if you have some drainage, some different things there. You can definitely quickly tell there's a difference. So looking at data, you're at Delta Force. We were, in all of our no-till ground, we were about 282. Non-Delta Force, we were about 278. So we were about 4.25. So you could definitely tell, depending on, the ground, if it's going to be a little lighter, in that conventional till where it doesn't need a lot of weight, it is only about 2.25. If you are getting in a no-till, it's a little harder. You need a little more pressure to get in there. Maybe need to move a little bit more material. You're starting to raise up. And then obviously with our cover crop, we were seeing even a bigger difference there. So in review, just kind of walking you through all of our information, you can see we had cover crop, no-till, conventional till, across all about 700 acres that we ran our planter across. These were our averages, when I average everything across everything. And so we were about 6 bushel an acre at $3 a bushel. We were about $18 an acre difference from one side to the other. So it adds up, pretty fast. Return on investment, just kind of walking this through so everybody can see it. This is what I really talk to people about, and I want it to return fast. Technology changes so quick. If you can't return very, very quickly, it's tough to spend that kind of money. So If you look at a Kenzie 3000, you currently already have a 2020, and you say, hey, Jeremy, I want to put Delta Force. Here's what your prices are for a 12, 16, and 24 row. If you do your yield increase, it's 6. So if you just average it across, if you're all cover crop, obviously it'd be higher. If you're all conventional till, be a little lower. You can see price of corn, very conservative, $3 with that increase. So your payoff, there's a lot of guys that are going to be able to get that payoff, within 1 year. So very, very fast return on investment. I was one, I'll be very, very honest with you. The airbags on it and putting an Air Force system that was changing it as it went through the field. I was like, hey, that's the ticket. It's the return on investment is very, very fast. Going to a row by row, yeah, it's nice, but I wasn't really sold on it. I sold a lot of Air Forces last year. After seeing this data, I ended up doing a lot more Delta Forces. I don't sell Air Force anymore just because I see the huge difference row by row that it did it. So it definitely changed even my mindset when I'm talking to people. Real quick, I think we have some time. Then we'll open up to some questions. Just showing you some other data that we found on in the field, and these are we've moved everything to air. And last year we ran, just to kind of give you guys a little scope, we ran over 1,000 seed meters last year out of our office. Out of 1,000 seed meters, we were probably 700 of those were finger sets. That's a lot of finger meters, and we found very quickly it's tough. It's the wear items, those type of things. It quickly you got to calibrate those every year at $30 a pop to calibrate, plus yield or prices to rebuild, and your air, just the air and those type of things. It's really, really tough. We convert a lot of guys to these Vac, and that's what we end up going across the whole planter. So what this means down here on the planter performance, no matter what side it was on, hydraulic, spring, all those type of things, we added them all together. Our singulation across all 700 acres was 99.8%. A finger set, you could get on a meter stand and get 98.5, a really, really good one, and like maybe a small, medium round seed. If you start mixing and matching, you're going to struggle in the field probably 96% or less. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like. One thing we did is we wanted to show skips and doubles on kind of like what a finger set does. This is a seed disc, and in the blue area right here is a skip, and this is a double. We actually, or this is a skip, sorry. We actually filled that with putty, and we put skips in here to actually show a double. Not skips, we drilled a hole to do a scubble. Yeah. So here's what that looks like. We just did it on one pass because obviously we didn't want to do a whole field that way. But just to show you for an example, a lot of finger pickups will look similar to this. And a lot of guys will be like, oh man, that's horrible singulation. What is that? One thing I noticed that's 96.3% singulation on this pass. So for those guys that are finger pickups, I run a lot of them. They're like, oh, 95%, 96% is good enough. This is what that looks like compared to some of this other side in here. It's pretty dramatic. So one thing to think about as you're walking through and doing some planter stuff, really look at updating to a Vac planter. It's dramatic, and you never have to worry about seed size again. Here's a study. So if you look at this plot, here's what our plot was. We had a lot of rain after we planted. All our seeds sat in the ground for like 2 weeks, I think. And we had a big stream going right down the center of our plot. So we struggled getting a lot of good data off this plot in these small doses, where on a large scale, it was a lot easier to get. So we went out and found this study. This is AGCO study. They did pretty similar to what we did. I always joke around and say they stole my idea, or maybe I stole theirs. I'm not really sure which, but I'm gonna side that they stole my idea, just because. But you can see where they did their testing, pretty similar results to ours, 99.6% across everything else, and they were losing about 8%. So we were losing about 8 bushels. And here's your difference in between those rows here. So again, it's just like one of those studies that we all read upon. And I'm bummed that I didn't get some data there, but just wanted to kind of show you what some people are seeing. Singulation, just real quick. Here's what it would take if you went vac system. That's adding a vac, adding all the harness, the hoses, everything you need, the meters, the boxes, everything. They're gonna be very similar to these prices. So you can see your return on investment is very, very fast, even at 4% or 4 bushel increase. And then also to think about your wear and tear every single year. If you have a 16-row planter at $30 a row, plus having to put new parts in it everywhere, you might have a $400 to $500 bill every single year. Where these, I had a guy run them 5 years when they first came out. I went through them on there, and we were still at like 99 and a half. I mean, they were awesome. So they were really, really good. Row shutoffs. I've been talking row shutoffs for a long time. I think every technology guy has. Most of you probably have them. If you don't, this is an interesting part. 770 acres. This planter right here, this is our row shutoff. Here is our planter without row shutoffs. So our one side with row shutoff planted 15 and a half acres less than the side with row shutoffs or without them. And it just shows you right there. I mean, across an operation, it's very, very, that adds up fast. And we would always joke around as we would run out of seed. We'd always run out of seed on the side without row shutoffs. And, it was amazing on that side of it. And this is with no waterways. We planted through waterways. We didn't have those mapped out. We're going to map those out this year and even have probably a greater difference there. But definitely row shutoffs pay. Here's a return on investment, just so if you're curious. Here's some percentages of what Kansas State University uses. Very similar to ours. We were probably, we were right around that 4.5%. Somewhere right around there is what we ended up at. If you were adding clutches and all those, and you can see you can get in 10 grand pretty quick on a 16-row planter. But if you start doing the math, your payment's going to be pretty quick. If you just did seed savings, there's 1,700 acres. If you're doing yield drag, so all those areas, that 15 acres that you double planted, you're obviously not going to get the same yield. So if you use APH of 180, is what we use here in Iowa. So that means you're probably around that 100 to 90 bushels in that 15 acres. So your return on investment is going to be very, very fast on shutoffs. And that's just from data we saw right there. Other planter attachments, just kind of walk you through some of the things we did. These are the row cleaners we used. We were very, very impressed with these row cleaners because we were going across conventional till, no-till, and cover crop. This was a very, very good universal row cleaner. I get questions all the time. What should I do? What should I put on? I've had multiple customers put 5 or 6 different closing wheels on there and go out there, and a lot of them come back and put this type of poly wheel back on it. It just really closes that that trench very, very well. I don't have any data. We're going to try to get some more data this year. But just again, this is data from Beck's PFR book. If you're familiarized with that book, I highly recommend it. There's a ton of really, really good data from them in there. They're a credible, I believe, third-party source. They're saying anywhere in their testing, they were about 5.8 to 13.2 bushel. Seems very, very high. But what we saw this year, it was pretty wet when we were planting. And then we dried up for a couple of weeks. A lot of our furrows actually opened back up and caused some issues where when we were running these row cleaners, they were able to knead that dirt together, and we didn't have any issues with those furrows cleaning up or opening up. Here's a picture of our planter, just so you can see just to see what we had for row cleaners. So just kind of giving an example there. So
I will say if I run another planter besides this test planter, and we ran Martin spike closers on the back for no-till with a chain drag. And if any of you guys have been running a chain drag and and you don't have your rebar welded up over the top so the chain doesn't flip back and lock up one of those closers. When I got into the test planner, and I started running with those closing, with the ones you see, man, it was one less thing I had to worry about. And I really did. And right when I ran it and I looked to see what it was doing in that cover crop, I thought, man, this is where we need to be, because it did such a nice job closing versus the spike closers. And I always liked the spike closers, but until I ran this set, it's night and day difference.
So with that, we're pretty close to our hour, I believe. It's almost 8 o'clock. We kind of ran through a ton of data really fast. Again, a lot of data-driven decisions to be able to use that. So I guess got one question here from Carl. Any thoughts about using drones to check the cover crops throughout the fields? I mean, I don't know if I have a great answer for that, but I know we do a lot of drone work. We're planning on doing a lot more this year, just doing crop health, those type of things. With drone deploy is what we're using.
Yeah, Jeremy and Rob, that was a ton of great information and great data.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
But so yeah, we've got plenty of time for questions. So it looks like there's some people chatting here. We'll see what they've got. So do get your questions in the chat box if you want to ask something to Jeremy or Rob here. I guess while we're waiting, or I guess Chris has got a question there. But you mentioned a couple of things, Jeremy. Something that I was wondering about, I guess, if you have any specific projects in mind for this year that might carry on anything you've already done, or any new research that you're looking into doing this year, something that we should keep an eye on?
Yeah. Yep. So we've done a major planter rebuild again. So Chris kind of alludes to it a little bit here. And I should have probably put some, what we're doing next pictures. But we brought that planter into the shop this winter, in the Robb shop, and we gutted it again. We're trying to figure out what that next step is. What we found with precision planting is a Kenzie 2000 row unit. We weren't able to do maybe some of the newer stuff like Speed Tube, and maybe some of the new products that are going to get released here in the next couple years. So I started looking for what we're going to do next. We thought about selling the planter. We thought about, many different options. And somehow I got a hold of 16 used Kenzie 3000 row units and only had about 1,000 acres on them. Turned around, I found somebody to buy our 2,000 row units. So we put all new to us row units on it. Our bar is in very, very good shape, even though it's 20 years old. It does exactly what we want. And, so it was really, really good. We've spent, we had to weld a few things here and there on the markers, so we know the bar very, very well. And it also kind of tells the story about just keep updating your planter versus going and buying new, as long as your row configuration and all that is where you want. So we went and put brand new, new to us, 3,000 row units, and then turned around. And as you can see by the data, nobody wanted our planter in their field unless it had hydraulic downforce across all 16 rows, including Rob sitting here. We actually had it outfitted half and half, and Rob comes in and he did a very good job of convincing us that we needed it on all 16 rows. And we're excited. We have a few plans there. And we did electric drive across the whole thing. So no more chains, no more of that. So we truly do have a electric planter, hydraulic planter, no chains, all that, no springs, none of that type of stuff. And then, like I said, Chris is alluding to the smart firmer side of it. Smart firmers, if anybody knows what a smart firmer is, it's basically a Keaton seed firmer that can measure organic matter. It can do moisture, temperature. It can read material in the furrow. So if your row cleaners aren't cleaning up well enough, it can measure that. How much trash is in there. So we're going to be walking through that, or we're going to add those to all 16 rows. So, and then what we're going to do is we're going to still do some delta force tests. We can still get some data on that. And then also we're still going to have a 8 and 8 planters. We're going to run still two 2020s, two delta force systems, two electric drive systems, a little more complexity, but 16 smart firmers. And then we're going to actually test variable rate versus standard rate. So if you're always doing 32,000, and that's what Robb does in this field, we'll do 32,000 across that, and then we're going to let the smart firmers run the rest of it and variable rate across that field. So we're looking forward to that type of data. So that way, we have found so many people can variable rate. It's hard to, unless you have somebody that you trust to be able to make those variable rate maps. Robb can probably key in here. It's just not the easiest thing to do every year.
We've been doing variable rate and prescription planning for 3 or 4 years. We've been sampling our soil by soil type, trying to get the best idea on where those are at based off of old soil maps. And this is the thing that I was really pushing for, because I'm excited to see putting a smart firmer on each row. We're gonna get our soil maps just as good as you can get them. I mean, and to see if there's going to be economics, if we're going to get a return on this. I don't know. I have an idea that we will, but until we do it, and we have a lot of variable soil, this is really unknown. Some of the stuff that we tested this last year, it had been done before. It had been tested by the big companies, and we brought kind of a local feel to it. But this is something I don't know if anybody can tell us if it pays or not. And I mean, we're kind of jumping ahead a few years to see if this is where we need to be and where we're headed. But I am really excited to see what kind of mapping we get going across there. I just talked to my seed salesman and my agronomist, and they came up with the recs on we're basing everything off of organic matter, and we have 5 different settings for population, and we're going to see what it does when we go across all these fields this next year. I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I'm kind of excited to try it.
Yep. We've got some more replicated tests to do too with with our row cleaners, and yeah, so there's a lot of stuff coming for next year too. Margaret had a question on a drill. I could tell you a story about a drill. Looks like Chris has a webinar too. For those of you who have been around drills quite a bit, I actually have a customer that we're doing some things this year. He took a drill with beans getting as large as they are. He was struggling with the SI meters. So we actually custom raised his box and put a Vac V-set meter on it. So he'll be V-set metering out of a drill next year because of the size of beans and what they've been struggling with those SI meters. So I don't know if I'll have much data there for next year, but we're definitely messing around with some stuff. And I've got quite a few guys that are putting hydraulic downforce also on their drill. Again, I don't have any data really to go with that, but I've got 2 guys right now that are putting that on there right now to do some playing around for next year. Mark, any past data on seed firmers? So Keaton seed firmers, I think Robb and I are kind of shaking our head. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in the no-till and you got to run some sort of spike closer or something, you're not running rubber, you want to make sure that seed's where it's at. You want to make sure it's contacted. I don't know where my experience, I've run them for a long time. And I just,
yeah,
I have a friend in central Iowa where it's really heavy wet soil. And he ran into some troubles with them balling up, but he found the short tail ones really worked better than the long tail. And the biggest thing is make sure they're not wore out, make sure that they have plenty of they have the right amount of force to keep in the furrow and to keep themselves rubbed clean. I think that's the biggest thing with a seed firmer.
Yeah, I get out on a lot of them, and we noticed that the biggest thing is they start wearing out a little bit. They just don't have as much down pressure on them, and they get a little floppy. A lot of guys will wait till it's leaning one way or the other. And the only way I really test it is pick it up and see if it hits down on the ground with a big thump. If it doesn't, I definitely replace it and keep that. And obviously, don't back up when you're in the ground. We could tell you stories about that. Many problems of hairpinning seeds in the field where the rye headed out.
Well, we didn't have any issues where I had those things full bore down in the ground. I mean, it stripped it clean. Like I said, our issue was seed depth at that point because it just pushed the row units out of the ground, and we didn't have good depth. I guess I didn't see it, but there's just as long as you're cleaning out a little strip there. I mean, that's really all we need. We're looking for. Mm-hmm. I guess I get more concerned about the hairpinning if we're going into corn than I do on soybeans.
Great question, Chris.
Yeah, good questions, Chris and Margaret and everyone else. We do have a few more minutes here, though, for anybody else who's got that burning question for these two. Or Jeremy or Rob, if you guys have anything else to add that on something you've already talked about, we've got a little bit of time here.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like I said, we screened through this stuff, guys. So I mean, I've given the presentation enough that I probably skim on some stuff, but any questions on any of the data, any of the maps we saw? I mean, there's some really interesting things going on here. You can see here's a road right here. I mean, what's fun about this is it kind of gives you an idea of what's going on in the field. If you're somebody that doesn't know what's going on and they just want to start measuring stuff before they go to hydraulic downforce and those things, I strongly suggest there's 3 or 4 systems out there that can measure down pressure, downforce. I strongly suggest starting to record that data. That way you can make data-driven decisions. Listening to me and Robb and your local dealer is definitely helpful, but really seeing what's out in the field, that's where I get a lot of guys to start off with. Go through a 20/20 on it, 3 to 5 sensors, and just go take data. Let's just see what's going on. And I've had some planters that they run, and their downforce is good. I'm like, hey, I think you're solid. That's not an area we need to worry about. So most of the time it's not the case, but I've had one guy that is happened. But he would have never known without taking the data.
We could go past that one again. We don't need to look at that anymore.
Rob doesn't want to look at that one. So
yeah. Hey, so
yeah.
So I posted a link in the chat box there to that Iowa soybean article about the cover crop, the research that you guys did. That is actually what we saw here at PFI and why we reached out to you guys because we were interested in this. Is there, for future stuff that you guys do with, collecting this kind of data, is there anywhere we can look to find that? Do you have, do you put any of this on the website, Jeremy, on your guys' ChuMaker website?
Yeah, up to this point, I mean, our website is I think it's a decent website, but we don't have a lot of area that we've really been updating a lot. If you are on Twitter and Facebook, we do post a lot of things throughout the season. As we're looking at maps, we might post a map here and there, just kind of showing what we're doing. We do save a lot of data to really reveal it at a data release party that we have after fall. With our customers and prospects and clients that really go through it. And then after that gets done over the winter, we just kind of splash some stuff throughout the winter. So it's, we don't publish dramatically exactly what we're doing. So that's,
yep.
Check our Twitter feed. We do a lot of stuff on that.
Good deal. Well, maybe Bob's got a question here. It looks like Bob's typing, but
Yeah.
we might wrap this up here if we're exhausted in the chat box.
Yeah, and if anybody thinks of any questions throughout it, I mean, we're trueacre.com. Get on there, and there's a website you can reach out to us. Our phone number's on there. Don't hesitate, to give us a ring at any time, and just for even some insights of what you're seeing. And I'm always interested in learning and learning what you're seeing. So don't hesitate to give us a ring. I do short research plots. Does Delta Force start immediately when the machine moves? So one thing, so the question was, yeah, you can read it here, but does Delta Force start immediately when the machine moves? It does. One thing we found is if you're doing, I don't know how short your research plots are, but it needs a little time to be able to 50 foot. Okay, that's it'll be tough, you know. Um, it does react very, very, very fast. Um, but I would say your first 5 foot, just you getting up to speed and those type of things are going to affect it. Obviously, speed affects downforce. The faster you go, the more the ground's pushing up on the opener. So long story short, 50 foot might be a little short though. It might. I don't know. We didn't do much of that. We had a 100 foot. I think it was 150 foot paths that we were doing in ours, and it seemed to do relatively well. Pretty quick. And I just run manual, absolutely. So in the setting, there's an active setting where it will automatically it'll read your sensor, and then it's going to react, and always try to keep it within. Let's say you pick 100 pounds, it's always going to try to get to 100 pounds. Or what you can do is you can set it to manual, and you can set it just like springs. So if you set it to 175, that's acting like your spring was set to 175. It's not going to change. It's not going to read your sensor. It's just going to push down 175 pounds.
Yeah, good questions, Bob. But it looks like yeah, maybe this is a good time to wrap it up. So Jeremy and Rob, really appreciate you guys taking the time to share some of these tests and research projects that you guys have done, because you've got a lot of great data. That was super interesting. So thanks for joining us and for sharing us. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We do have this recorded again. If anybody wants to go back through it, it'll be on our website at practicalfarmers.org. So Jeremy and Rob, hopefully we can stay in touch. I'd love to see what you guys are doing in the future. I know our members would too. So we'll try and keep an eye on what you're up to.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate it. Thanks for having us on. And again, if anybody has any more questions in the future, don't hesitate to reach out, and we'll do our best to help you out.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, guys.